Welcome again, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our Intelligent Planning for Retailers webinar this morning. I'm Jennifer Michael, and I lead the board practice for Taysols. Taysols is a business analytics consulting company that has been delivering EPM, budgeting and planning, and reporting solutions for over 20 years. We work with leading vendors in this space, including Board, Snowflake, and Microsoft, to name a few. I'm joined today by Andrew Jerrigan, one of Taysols' retail specialists. Andrew has worked with numerous clients in the retail space and has designed and developed end-to-end merchandise planning solutions, working in collaboration with various lines of business, including finance and retail. So Andrew will discuss some of the common planning issues and challenges that his clients have encountered and how a solution like Board has helped them bring various siloed planning processes together into a single platform, enabling true intelligent planning. We are also joined today by Lachlan McPherson, Commercial Sales Manager from Board. Lachlan works with Board's international fashion retail experts and will talk about some of their customer use cases in the retail space. We will also go through a live demonstration of the Board solution during this session to show you an example of what intelligent planning can mean for your organization. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Jen. So, as Jen introduced, I've been in the retail space for about 5 years now. And what we're going to talk through today are the planning challenges that I've encountered and how the platform of Board Intelligent Planning Solution has really resolved and tackled those challenges. So planning is a key activity in any organization, yet it is often the hardest to get right. Specifically in the retail sector, planning is made even more complicated because you're working in these different silos. So particularly around retail, you'll have a department for finance where you're focused in on your budgeting and forecasting, your strategic planning, top-down targets. You'll have your merchandise planners who are really focused in on those products and your whizzies and mizzies, your OTB process, planning out your markdowns. And even within that merchandise planning platform, you may have sub-departments that tackle your assortment piece, your buying piece, your season planning, your store and distribution. And so what you end up with are these distinct lines and separations within your organization. And this often presents a lot of challenges in this kind of line of business. So we found that with the clients we've worked with, they still rely on outdated systems, particularly Excel when they're doing their planning process. Now, in reality, a merchandise planner, for instance, will be planning in Excel with multiple spreadsheets. A finance manager will be doing their forecasts in Excel, and they may have a best of breed tool on the side of Excel to do their forecasting as well. But there becomes this significant disconnect between the different, as we're calling them, silos of your organization. And this results in these challenges that I've got listed below. So often there is a lack of automation and data quality within organizations. So I've sat in a room with a financial planner, a merchandise planner, and a supply chain manager, and they were presenting their results to the CEO. And we spent about 30 minutes to an hour just trying to unpack why there was inconsistencies in the numbers that were being presented, instead of actually focusing on the critical tasks at hand. From a data privacy and security point of view, Excel is not the most secure system in terms of managing data. You could be pulling data from traffic systems, you could be pulling it from e-commerce platforms, your POS and ERP systems, all being hosted in your Excel spreadsheets. There's high risk, especially with, say, this introduction of AI and machine learning and those kind of tools, and that there's an increased risk of data breaches is what I'm trying to say in any organization. Whilst Excel can host many complex models and have all your macros and references between various sheets, it does lack a bit more on that forecasting ability, specifically in terms of complexity and integrating, say, AI machine learning capabilities. I know Excel does have some capabilities around AI and machine learning, but there are tools, and we're going to demonstrate to you through the Board platform of how you could integrate a solution that not only allows you to focus on critical tasks at hand, but it can showcase to you within your organization patterns in your data, so you can actually start to gain a competitive advantage and focus in on what's driving your individual business to succeed over others. And finally, from a change management point of view, is a big issue within organizations. So again, I've worked with countless retailers where I've seen a merchandise planner who's been honed in on their whizzies and mizzies, pulling data from 30 different spreadsheets into one single spreadsheet. And then one day they move on to a different role or a different business. And then it's on the organization to hire someone else with a completely different skill set to step in and continue running with a process that's been really just dumped from someone's mind into an Excel spreadsheet with all their own niche ways of planning. And so that challenge of training that individual or getting them into your business and driving success within your organization is a big one as well. And finally, with the data residing in various systems and spreadsheets or your various best of breed tools, there's no real single version of the truth. And that really impacts a retail organization's ability to adapt quickly and stay on top of competition and the market out there as well. So what's the solution? What are we proposing today to tackle these challenges? So I've worked alongside the Board Intelligent Planning platform for about 3 years now. And I've been able to build out end-to-end models, specifically in the retail space. And I've been able to interlink the various departments of an organization, whether it's your finance department talking to your merchandise department, whether it's bringing in that supply chain process or having your marketing team involved in this end-to-end process as well. So Board boasts a low-code, no-code process, which means it's easy to deploy, it's easy to get up and running and immediately add value to your business. You can plan from a bottom-up, top-down perspective, and we'll look at that today in this live demonstration. You can host big data, so your millions of SKUs that you're loading in from your various ERP systems, Board can host that, and again, we'll tackle that in the live demonstration. As well as what if scenario modeling, your hierarchy management. I know that's core to a lot of retail businesses, is managing out your locations and their hierarchies, your products and their hierarchies, and managing all your items down at that SKU level as well. Before we dive into the demo, I'm actually going to pass it on to Lachlan, who's a board representative in the retail space as well. He's going to actually take us through a few case studies of where Board has applied this intelligent planning, specifically in the retail sector. So over to you, Lockie.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. My name's Lachlan McPherson. As you can see here, Board has a number of customers across the retail space globally, from major fast fashion brands such as H&M, all the way through to your high-end high street brands such as Burberry in the UK, as well as a number of other brands around the world. Now, Board isn't just active in the fashion retail space, but Board's heritage has been in the fashion retail space for over 2 decades. Andrew, I'll get you to move on to the next slide. We won't spend too many time on Board's customers. Please feel free to take a look at Board's website, and we've got customer case stories there as well. Now, in the past, Board was very largely used by high street fashion retail brands throughout the UK and Europe as an intelligent planning solution. But today, everyone really sees the need for an intelligent planning solution and the importance of having intelligent planning and a single source of truth for a number of reasons, as Andrew just mentioned. But what we're going to look at today is a couple of use cases or case study examples of existing Board customers. As you can see, the Very Group is the first one there, which we'll dive into in just a moment. And also today, but we'll also dive into what these particular customers are using the Board Intelligent Planning platform for, and just how it's changed their business. So starting with the Very Group, let's take a quick look. Now, there are a number of challenges for the Very Group as they looked to, I guess, resolve those challenges with the Board platform. Now, COVID-19, I think, has impacted not just the retail sector, but just about every sector around the world. But the Very Group was no difference. They have about 2 million brands, 8 million products, and they're the UK's largest financial services and retail firm that currently in existence. So they really combine easy ways to buy for their customers with flexibility, convenience, and value. So planning is really seen as one of the most important, but also the most difficult aspects for the very group, and also essential to allow them to really keep that accuracy, not just within the products that they bring through to their customers, but also their internal processes, being range planning, assortment, and forecasting throughout the business. So before the board platform, the very group had a number of challenges. Now, those challenges were really down to their planning. Their planning was inefficient, but it was also inaccurate. And what that means is the way the very group were planning was probably like a number of people on the webinar today, very much Excel driven, very much based on where their planners have come from before, and I guess a siloed approach to that planning process. In fact, the biggest pain points for the very group were their efficiency to make decisions based on that siloed planning practice, but also the level of integration when it comes to the data that they're bringing into the business. So like you're probably doing now, the very group were having to plan manually. Their team were having to enter data into spreadsheets and then feed that data up to the other areas of the business. Since implementing the board platform, that's become automated. Now, how does that flow through to the business? It means the planners are spending less time entering data, there's less mistakes, they have a single version of the truth, but they also have visibility to the rest of the business of that planning process. Now, the flow-on effect of that creates huge efficiencies throughout the organization, but it also means the planners can be working on more important aspects of the business. Now, Andrew, if we move on, I've got another use case here of a customer which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, Puma. So Puma's, as we know, a very large organization, but it's an organization that's had a large number of acquisitions. So that was one of the major challenges for Puma. If we look at Puma as a much broader level than the very group, they were having these multiple acquisitions in countries around the world. What that means is, from a reporting standpoint, they've got different systems, different reports, all feeding through, often in spreadsheets, up to the rest of the business. What this provides is a lack of visibility, not just internally with the organization, but also competitively. So if you've got siloed reporting across the business, you don't have that single source of the truth. You've also got a disconnected organization. By bringing all that together, it allows Puma to have a complete planning, reporting, and analytics solution within the board platform. And what it really means is, as a global organization, they can have the right products in stock at the right time. And as one of my colleagues says, it's one thing, it's great to know what you were selling this year and what sold well this year, but what's really important is having the best understanding of what's going to sell well next year. So having all of that information at hand can really help in making those decisions. Now, the solution for Puma was twofold. We looked at that big picture, or that macro level of the business, in terms of a strategic plan, setting targets, having a conceptual assortment plan for a big picture of the organization, having the senior executive level management with visibility all throughout the top big picture area of the business, and then being able to look at various scenarios, how those scenarios might roll through to the rest of the business, and then being able to create a plan based on that. As we move down from that strategic plan, Puma then looks at the execution side of the business. That means the line, that means the range, the assortment requirements, and then also feeding that through to finance and sales. So if we look at a much larger organization like Puma, they're using the board platform on a more macro level and feeding that down to the smaller level. Now, you saw a few of Board's existing customers there. All of those customers are using Board in different aspects. It might be just for the merchandise planning. It might be across the whole organization, or as a lot of them are doing it, they look for those biggest pain points and then they implement, fix those issues first, and then look at other areas where they can extract value for the business. Now, Andrew, I don't want to keep you from the demo. I'm sure you'll expand on a lot of this as we move forward. So back to you.
Thank you very much. So yes, very impressive case studies that Board offers. And just to paint the picture before we dive into this live demonstration, the vision of Board is to boast, I guess, collaboration, automation, growth, and data-driven decision-making. So in this visual here is an example of how you could have different modules within the Board platform, all hosted under one URL on the cloud network. You could combine your FP&A process to your retail process. So you could have a module dedicated to FP&A, a module dedicated to retail, sales performance management, workforce management, supply chain management, consolidation, and many other aspects of your organization. We can interlink these departments. Now, following on from the flow of what Lockie just spoke of with Puma, they started at a strategic planning level, flowed it into their retail process, and incorporated a bit of supply chain in that process as well. And that's what we're going to demonstrate in this live demo today. So I'm actually just going to move into the Board environment. And what we've got here is a fictitious business that we've set up, just called Olive Clothing, very simple. And what we've got on this dashboard is just a representation of the different areas that this company has brought together: their finance department, retail department, and supply chain. So to kick things off, what we're going to do is we're going to enter into the finance area. We're going to just set the scene with a strategic plan and see how that can interlink straight to that merchandise planning process. Now we can have follow-up sessions as well dedicated to this FP&A module, but for this instance, we're just going to dive right into the strategic plan of this process. So to start your process as a financial planner, you may set up your various macroeconomic drivers, your revenue, inflation, tax rates, etc. You can utilize the Board administration and set up various versioning, manage your time ranges, import that into the process. I'm not going to spend too much time on this process. I'm just going to run through it very quickly because I just want to showcase just the concept of what Board can provide. So you'd set up your macroeconomic drivers. You would then manage your strategic goals. Now, given we're working with a retail organization, some of your initiatives may be a new product launch, omni-channel integration, could be loyalty programs and retention. These are just some examples of initiatives that you could set up for your upcoming year. And you could manage and add new initiatives as well, set up the various tasks allotted to those initiatives. So Board allows you to enter data into the system. So at all times, I can write data into the database and store it there as well. So I get to assign an owner, a status, a start date, end date. And I could visualize that in a different way if I wanted to view it in a Gantt chart, just to get an overall view of the upcoming year as well. Now, the next stage of this strategic planning process could be to assign the values to those initiatives. So drilling into and selecting into that new product launch, I can enter in my data of my revenue, my gross margin, EBITDA, and save and update those figures with embedded calculations in the system. So similar to Excel, we can port across all of your calculations and formulas and store them in various procedures and buttons and make it very efficient within the Board platform. The next stage, which is quite an important stage in whether it's financial planning or merchandise planning, is around scenario what-if modeling. So given we've experienced the highs and lows of COVID and moving into, say, focusing in on your e-commerce platforms instead of your store platforms, and now we've come out of COVID and there's a big shift into innovating your stores and focusing in on that. But at the same time, we're facing rising interest rates and inflation rates that's, I guess, decreasing consumer spending and the power of consumer spending. And so to combat these challenges in the future is to set up various scenarios and have them in place in your data structures and warehouses. So in this instance, we could have a best case scenario where all of my initiatives go to plan. We have a great year. We improve customer satisfaction, innovate our stores, optimize our supply chains. Or if the market starts to go downhill, we could have a defensive strategy in place whereby we are just going to focus in on our baseline, our new product launch and omni-channel integration, but we're not going to focus in on the store innovation yet because we're just not going to hit that target. So you can easily, I guess, set up these scenarios and have them in place. So in the instance that something does go wrong, you can quickly and effectively have this accelerator already in place and run that through the entire model as well and get right to the end. Now, at the end of your strategic process, you'll have an overview. Now, in here, it's saying I'm forecasting $764 million in revenue. Now, at this stage, you could take this further down your FP&A process, but for this example, and what Puma did as well, is they moved the strategic plan straight into the merchandise planning model. And we can do so with an embedded procedure, as I spoke to earlier. So I can hit this button here, and it's actually pushing my data to my merchandise planner. And I've actually just got a message because it's also linked into Teams that's now alerted the merchandise planner that they are ready to go and start planning in their process. So board can interlink with various platforms, and in this instance, it's linked to Power Automate, where we've got that Teams integration. And I'll just give you an example of how that looks. So I've got the message coming through from Power Automate saying, "Hi, Andrew, just alerting you that Graham W., my financial planner, has finished the strategic plan for 2024. Please access board with this link." So immediately you've got an integration between the two teams. There's no stoppage in sending emails and having to wait upon so-and-so to send you data for here or there. It's straight away integrated and the data's there ready for you to take further. And that's where we're going to take it forward into the world of retail. So I just showcased you the FP&A model, and that, whilst being hosted under the same URL, has its own security, has its own database, has its own structures, etc., has its own workflow, completely separate to the module of retail here, but they're all still within the same board environment and can talk to one another, as we've just demonstrated as well. So again, I've got another notification coming through just saying that my strategic plan is good to go. Now, I could have already begun my process and just incorporated these numbers, but for this instance, we're just taking it from a top-down perspective. So we're just going to carry forward the process of that strategic plan. So as a merchandise planner, I'll start with my financial review. And in here, we're going to look at how my numbers are coming through against my various locations and channels. So straight away, we can see that 764 million from our strategic plan has come through. And we're now budgeting and targeting that number as we go down the process of getting down to our line level. So this fictitious business is a global company, so you may see some odd cities across the world as I progress into the next screen. But the I guess process stays true as managing the data from top to bottom. And you can manage your various years, months, if you're working on your budget and your versions, all of that can be controlled in the board space as well. And all of your channels can be loaded in, for instance. So you've got your store, wholesale, e-commerce. So board can manage all those integrations here as well. So the next stage would be to manage it down at that location store level. Now, in this instance, as I said, it's a global business. So we've got stores coming in from various cities. We could add new locations in. So if you are creating or opening a new store for the upcoming season, you could have that preloaded in here or add it on the fly so I can incorporate it straight away into the system. And you could have embedded like-for-like calculations and phasing profiles that allow you to quickly set up those new locations and add value to your process as well. Now, this particular example, we're going to break down our sales forecast that we've gotten from the financial planners down to our sales units through the ACP or ASP methodology. So in here, you could set up your ASPs and ACPs against your various product lines. And we can load in all your product hierarchy. So if you had five levels of your hierarchy, we can incorporate that. If you had 10 levels, we can incorporate that. So, and it incorporates it all the way down to that SKU level. So board can cater that big data and those hierarchies as well, and manage all of those relationships in the system too. And you can see all of our filtering coming through against, in this instance, product family and product group, and we can filter down to those as we see fit. And in the next stage of this open to buy process, you could set up your seasonal versus continuity stock. So what are we selling? What are we targeting for our various seasons versus what are we selling all year round? And in a similar vein, you could plan out your product mixes. So in here, we could enter in our percentages that we're going to invest into our, say, rings for the upcoming season. Maybe I want to bump that up to 30% for the upcoming year. So I could save that, lock in that 764 figure that we got from the finance department, save that, and then I've got that updated right away into the system. What Board boasts that Excel doesn't is that you can essentially drill into your data. So instead of having 10 to 15 different sheets of data that are connected via various macros and linkages and formulas, because Board's built upon these hierarchies and the data is all managed in a single source platform, whether it's your SQL warehouse, that's where your data's been cleaned and transformed and pulled into the Board platform, because it's all managed in this single source of the truth, we can essentially drill into this data further. So take rings, for instance. I could drill down to the lower level, in this instance, it's product. And I could begin planning at that lower level. I could lock in that 229 figure and enter data at these lower levels. I could bump that up to 60 million, save that data, and it's rolled up to that higher level of the hierarchy. So that's the efficiency driver within a platform like Board, whereby, as Lockie mentioned, talking to Puma and the Veri group, you're detracting and reducing the amount of, or unnecessary amount of time you spend on such simple tasks, and it frees you up to actually focus in on those critical tasks at hand. And you could go ahead and plan at your gross margin. In here, you could incorporate your discounting methods, your markdown processes. All of that can be embedded in this process as well. So what we're showcasing today to you is not by any means an out-of-the-box solution. What we're showcasing is how you could bring Board into your organization, and whether it's porting across your methods from Excel into Board and running with it that way, or using accelerators that we've got in place to move forward and build within your business. So that's what we're trying to demonstrate today. And again, in this, I spoke to it a bit earlier, which is around the AI and machine learning piece. So whilst Excel does have, it's got some solutions that you can get through add-ins, etc. Board has its own built-in capability around machine learning, and that's known as Beam, which is its analytical modeling tool, and that leverages about 10 to 15 different statistical models. You may have heard of some of them, like Holt-Winters regression or REMA, SARIMA, if there's any data scientists in the room, which is probably unlikely. But Board leverages about 10 to 15 of these models, and the similarity between these models is that they all look at historical market trends, look at the conditions, and then predict forward a line of best fit. Board has also recently partnered with Microsoft, so we can actually leverage the Azure machine learning framework, which I think boasts about 50 or so statistical models. So we've actually incorporated those as well. So you've got 60 odd statistical models all running at the same time against, could be at your SKU level, could be at your category level, and then predicting forward against those individual levels. So for instance, you could have all of your models running against watches, and it could use one of the 60 models to predict forward, but for jewelry, it could use a very different model to predict forward because it's got a different goodness of fit between the two forecasts. And this is where, again, Lockie spoke to freeing up time to focus on the important critical decisions. So you can actually use machine learning not as a way to just forecast forward and accelerate that process, but it actually allows you to find outliers and differences in your data that allow you to plan forward and tackle these market conditions that are upcoming. So you can adapt easier and again, just focus on the critical tasks at hand. And this process could be embedded in your financial forecasting. It could be utilized here in your sales and gross margin forecasting. It could be used in replenishment, and that forecasting could be used in demand forecasting, specifically around the supply chain process. So you can really leverage this one implementation of a statistical modeling tool and use it in all of the different silos of your organization, which inevitably reduces the costs involved in integrating machine learning into your environment, because data scientists aren't cheap, and a lot of machine learning tools out there as well are very expensive to integrate. And if you're just integrating it for finance, you're not getting the most value out of it there. What board boasts as well that separates it from competitors is that you can actually interact with this data. So not only are you just forecasting forward and using this machine learning and algorithms, you can actually feed in extra covariates. So in this instance, I've loaded in promotional activity. So I've loaded in all the promotions that happened in the past and when they're happening in the future. And I guess, adopted that into this machine learning process. So it now presents a forecast embedded with that promotional activity. So it's actually given me a different result because I've fed it more data and it's reacted to that data. And this could be very handy when it comes to, say, instead of promotional activity, you could be factoring in weather conditions, or you could be factoring in traffic, or you could be factoring in things like labor strikes or shortages. So you could factor in all these covariates to effectively increase the accuracy of your forecasts and gain that competitive edge as well. And that process could be used, this AI process could be used to kickstart your planning process. So we do have embedded procedures to say, give me an uplift of 10% on last year, and then I'll start entering my data, or a 15%, or alternatively, I could run in that predictive algorithm into this process and use that as my starting point. Now, in the instance that I do go down that route of incorporating AI and bringing those numbers in, it could give me a number of, say, 790 million as my predictive forecast. So that could inevitably override the financial forecast because it's factored in promotions that maybe the finance team didn't factor into their process. So immediately there's now this disconnect between finance and merch planning processes. And again, this is where you could have a triggered alert. So we could have an embedded procedure that runs overnight that picks up these differences in the data and sends off another team's message to the financial manager, letting them know that there is this disconnect. Or alternatively, you could have a button in place like we did before of pushing the strategic plan down to the merchandise planning process. Or board also has capabilities of chat. So I could chat to the financial planner immediately within the board platform and let them know of this difference. And then they could go ahead and update their numbers in their strategic plan and push the data back down. And by them doing that, by pushing it back down, it's not going to affect all the percentages I've set up in this system as well. These will all be stored. It'll just adopt that number that's come through from finance. Now, continuing down this process of getting down to a line plan, you've set up your pricing and those variables. You've done your product mix. The next stage that could be in your process could be to establish your open to buy units. So again, because data is coming through automatically from our SQL warehouse into the board platform, we've got our purchase orders and receipts coming through every day. It could be every day, it could be every week. Usually it's weekly in that retail world. So you can get those numbers in weekly, and then those open to buy units will continuously update. And this is where you could have, again, a procedure that pushes from this MFP planning process into the buying process, or if you're all managing it by yourself, you could just continue down into that range planning process, which I'm going to do so now. We're just going to move into the range plan. Again, this is where specifically where Puma went with their business. They wanted to embed a process like so, where it just flowed immediately through to your range plan. And in here, you could manage your collection creations, cluster your stores. So you could embed AI in this space if you wanted to cluster your stores. You could use a similar process of clustering, if you've utilized clustering in the AI world before, of grouping like for like stores using AI. Similar to like a market basket analysis process, you could embed that in here as well. So you could cluster your stores. Then the next process would be to tackle that assortment piece. So loading up your buy plans. You could integrate with source systems like Shopify and have all of your images come through immediately and automatically overnight as well. Load them into the system. And that connection between the open to buy process and range plan can be automated as well. If the open to buy was saying you need to order a certain amount of options, you could have a procedure in place that immediately populated the amount of lines in your buy plan here for you, ready to go. Alternatively, you could upload a flat file into the system. So Board allows you to upload Excel documents and flat files. So if you had all your SKUs laid out in an Excel file, you could load them up here. If you had various sketches as well, for instance, you could load them up into the system, and then you could start planning or against all the attributes of that product, whether it's color, by units, whether it needs a size curve, etc., what store grade it belongs to. You could plan out that process here as well. And continuing down this process, you'd set up your catalog, establish your buying split that's linking your buy plan to your stores, recap your item by those stores, and then inevitably this is where it pushes into that line plan process. Now, I am rushing through this quite quickly just because there's a lot to get through, and we can have follow-up sessions that really drill into these algorithms and metrics of how we've set up this piece of retail planning. So the next stage would be, or could be, that size breakdown. So you could load in your size curves. You could create new size curves in the system on the fly if you needed, and you could map those items that you're planning for against those size curves and apply those as well, which inevitably gets you to that kind of line level or purchase order level of detail, whereby in this instance it's saying for this blue shirt that with a SKU number of D109, is saying I need to order 11,423 units for the season, and it's breaking that down by the various sizes. So for size 36, I need to order 457 units. Now, this end-to-end process is going to be, you're going to be consistently talking to and from your financial planner, as we've shown through this process, but as well, you're going to have your supply chain manager heavily involved, whether it's through your demand plan forecasting, but particularly around this line forecasting is where they're going to be heavily involved. Because although the system and the way I've mapped my data to the bottom is saying you need to order 457 units, I need to know, do I actually have the warehouse space to cater for these units? Do I even have the materials to even create this good? So you need to manage that process, and that's where you could tie in the supply chain module. They can have their own separate area. Now, in this instance, we're not going to dive into that supply chain module, but I will demonstrate to you just some dashboards that can interrelate the retail planning and supply chain planning process. So in here, we've got a dashboard tied to your distribution, which is really focusing in on your product utilization and those rates involved. So you can have an example dashboard set up like here, where you've got your various products coming through, how they're being utilized in the various factories, some commentary, ongoing commentary from the supply chain team, whether, because you immediately want to know if there's any disruptions in the supply chain, if you can't fit certain goods in the warehouse, if you need to get it out immediately, things like that. You can manage that process. And in a similar vein, plan out, say, your distribution. Well, that was the production dashboard. This is the distribution dashboard. So in a similar vein, you could plan out that distribution in here, whereby you've got this overall average of 81%. Again, you could have an embedded procedure or trigger or an alert, whereby if that utilization rate drops to, say, 60%, immediately send a message to my financial planner, immediately send a message to my merch planner, letting them know that there is a disruption in the supply chain that could very well critically impact their business and processes. So that's what we've demonstrated in this kind of end-to-end model, is that Board can cater for these various challenges, whether it is the automation of data and the quality of data. We've shown how you can match the numbers from finance to merchant, even with the supply chain involved. From a data privacy and security point of view, because the data is all hosted in one environment and it's being managed in, say, one SQL warehouse, you're limiting and removing and minimizing the risk involved of, say, a data breach, because it's all being managed in one source system. From a change management point of view, and that challenge, because everyone's adopting a new platform, you're all actually working side by side in the one platform, meaning everyone's training up in the one platform, meaning it's easier to adopt because everyone can trade ideas and talk to and from the various teams about how they're using Board and how they're applying Board for their various silos. And from a model complexity point of view, we've touched on integrating machine learning and how that can be utilized in say, the board platform, and how it can actually drive or accelerate your business to the next stage, gain competitive advantage, whilst also at the same time reducing costs involved by having it on a single version of the truth. And before we wrap up and I pass it back to Jen, I just want to we've demonstrated that board can be a end-to-end platform. It can be an out-of-the-box solution, but what we want to showcase is that you should really, instead of adopting, say, a full end-to-end platform, you can actually start small and very modular. So, for instance, if you've already got a range plan in place, you don't necessarily have to utilize the range plan that we've built here. You could just start by, maybe you just want to embed a open-to-buy process. Maybe you just want to start at your demand forecasting process. So we could just start at those areas, those core areas of your business to immediately drive value. You don't necessarily have to embed a end-to-end platform. We can start small and grow. And that's what we really want to showcase with Board, is that it's all about the collaboration, the growth, and the data decision-making and adding value to your business. As well as that, specifically in the retail space, whilst this is a merchandise planning model, we could also open the doors up to, say, your in-store users or in-store managers, or your regional managers, and they could have or utilize Board as a dashboarding platform. Maybe they need reports generated tied to traffic. Maybe they need it, and what we've done in the past is built out loyalty and reward programs. So I've worked with retailers in the past that have needed and required the tracking of their loyalty program. So we could utilize Board as a dashboarding platform as well. And what that means is you're actually not only having 10 to 15 users from finance, 10 to 15 users from merch plan, but you can actually utilize Board and open the doors up to your entire business. So you can actually drive that value and, again, reduce those costs involved and boast that single version of the truth.